My name is Orsola De Castro, and I have zero idea as to what I do in life.
So thank you for joining us today, Ursula. We're really excited to have you here. For those who might be new to your journey, you've had an incredible career as an activist, a fashion icon, and one of the pioneers of upcycling. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your career, please?
So it's a difficult thing for me to describe myself. I can describe the things I've done. I have been an upcycling designer, one of the first. My brand started in 1997. We were definitely amongst the first, if not the first, to use pre-consumer textile waste at scale. We actually managed to do numbers with our upcycled collections. We sold internationally in many, many stores. We were worn by all the kind of late 90s and early noughties celebrities. We were on Carrie and Sex and the City, blah, 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 dee, blah. But effectively, I was very much experimenting with a technique which at the time was almost unexperimentable with, in the sense that not many people did it. I'm the co-founder of Estetica, which I've just restarted, but at the time when we began it, it was the Sustainable Fashion Showcase area for London Fashion Week, during London Fashion Week for the British Fashion Council. We launched the careers of designers such as Christopher Rayburn and many, many others. I am the co-founder and ex-creative director at Fashion Revolution. Fashion Revolution is the biggest fashion activism in the world. We have teams in 84 countries. I am one of the two co-founders. We started Fashion Revolution as a result of the Rana Plaza collapse in 2013. And the organization is undergoing a very exciting change at the moment, decentralizing and really strengthening the power and the voices of the country coordinators and the teams, the global teams that made it what it is now. I am an author. I published a book called Loved Clothes Last, which is a bit of a manual and a manifesto. It speaks about repairs and reparations. I'm a mentor and I support young designers all over the world, upcyclists in particular, by mentoring them, but also sitting on judging panels for competitions. Amongst all of this, all I really want to do is read, crochet, and mend my own clothes.
Thank you, Ursula. The work you have been doing for future generations is amazing. And I know that you've been working in the sustainable fashion space for more than 20 years now, but could you tell us a bit more about the brand that started it all for you?
So I started an upcycling brand in 1997. It was called From Somewhere. And it was the result of my own passion for butchering, I guess, but transforming clothes. This is something I've done since I was really quite young, quite small. So it came natural to me. And it continued to be a pioneering brand because at the time, I guess, to be honest with you, it wasn't about saving the world, or it wasn't about an environmental solution. It was a creative need as far as I was concerned. It was very poignant, very emotional. It was about the fact that I am over empathic and I can fall in love with a very small piece of fabric and I can't watch it being wasted. So that's the whole story behind it. I see almost more value in the brand now than I did then. I see exactly where we pioneered. But when you are pioneering, you have no frames of reference. So you actually think you're lost half the time, which is what I thought for years.
So before we come back to that pioneering work, for designers, the journey into getting into upcycling is often really unique. Could you share with us how you first got into it?
So I did not get into upcycling. The word didn't even exist in 1996, 1997, to be honest. So it wasn't a principle, it wasn't a technique, it just, I guess we still called it recycling, but very, very few people did it. So for me, it really was something related to me being over empathic, the fact that I fall in love with things. I'm animistic in relation to objects, textiles, and it's about saving, it's about keeping. It was about my own things. It was about wanting to keep what was mine longer. It was about loving things that were broken, because breakages to me told a story that was related to my life. So again, quite egotistic in many ways. It's this world that I've always had inside my head, which speaks about memories and poignancy, and it's tactile, it's loving. That's the construct inside of me. It became, how much can I save? Where more can I find? How many stones can I lift, and what can I dig from underneath them? It was archaeological as much as it was poetic. It was about the rediscovery and the reuse of things that are deemed unusable. So it's a constant kind of challenge towards myself, my creativity, my manuality. How much can I crochet? Where else can I find my waste? And I dug and I dug and I dug, and I visited factories and secondhand stores and markets and warehouses, and it was a journey, very, very much a journey. But I insist that it wasn't a journey to create a brand, even though I did it via a brand. It was a journey to create a methodology, to create a technique. I see upcycling as a technique. So I was a vehicle to experiment, like many, many others that are reusing. It's a vehicle to experiment this particular technique. And that is what is valid to me about the work that I've done.
Yeah, as you mentioned earlier, stepping outside the box comes with a lot of challenges, and I can only imagine trying to pioneer upcycling in the 90s was full of them. Could you tell us a bit more about what the driving force was behind From Somewhere?
What kept me going was the fact that we were successful, the fact that we were achieving sales. I mean, we sold online. We were one of the very first upcycling brands that could reproduce we created a sort of a subsidiary, an idea for a technique which we called reclaim to wear. That was the way that we operated, rather than the aesthetics of the brand, so that we could bring our technique onto so many others. We started off with an idea. The way that we described our collections at the early 2000s was that each piece is unique, but each design is reproducible. We were a traditional brand. We were part of a circuit of young designers in London. Many of them referenced vintage. This is the early, late 90s, early 2000s. So we pattern cutted traditionally. We graded traditionally. But obviously, we started experimenting on how to recuperate more and more and more waste.
So we now know a lot more about the scale of the waste in the fashion industry. But when you started From Somewhere, it wasn't as widely publicized and, as I imagine, as accessible for designers to get into upcycling. So where did you go about sourcing your materials from?
Our waste came, to begin with, secondhand, but always at scale. So I was literally climbing on mountains of waste in Prato, in the warehouse of the mythical Francesco Barni. Rest in power, rest in trash. I learned so much from the stories that he told me about clothes. And we then moved on to pre-consumer luxury waste, which we saved from the floors of some of the most beautiful factories in Italy. The sweet thing to me is that when we started picking the waste, we entered from the back door. We made friends with I magazzinieri. We made friends with, the people that really worked in the factory. It was only maybe 10, 12 years later that we made a grand entrance from the front door, when companies realized what kind of a service we were providing to them by recuperating their waste. We recuperated waste at scale, whether it was for them or with them, but certainly with the intention of creating a design solution to an environmental challenge. And many brands really understood the the importance and the use and the creativity in that, and allowed from somewhere in my brand to do it.
So the fast fashion really started in about the 90s, and since then the impact of the industry has only got a lot worse. So when and how did you really start to become aware of the negative impacts of the industry?
So the industry has speeded up exponentially, even just from 1997, which is, whatever, 25, 26 years ago. And it happened in the most kind of tsunami-like way when you observed it. You could just see the swelling, see the swelling, see the swelling, then the devastation. I think we are at devastation point right now, which is interesting though, because after the devastation comes the anger, the outrage, and the more successful we became, the more I was then aware of what was happening in the industry, not just at production level, but mentality. The mentality of the fast fashion, that you need to, you know, buy new, buy new, buy new. The messaging behind fast fashion, it's so badly made that you might as well throw it away. I mean, I've been going against that messaging for 20 years. In 97, 98, 2000, 2001, 2002, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, this was just not a conversation. You were really radical. I was really radical for saying this industry is polluting and exploitative. This industry is exploiting women. This industry is exploiting nature. The journey was also about radically changing how people thought about the resources that are already existent. Whether it's in your wardrobe or in the backyard of a massive factory in Sri Lanka. For me, that's where you need to operate first from. And so it was a massive learning curve, and one that I'm understanding more and more now, way more than I understood it then. I very much want to spend the next 20 years of my life back to where I started. So for me, we are at crunch point, and there is no other sustainable solution which can compare to the actual reuse of what we've already created. It's called reparations, it's called damage done, and I pledge my future to this as I pledged my past to it as well.
So if upcycling is one of the solutions, why is the industry not normalizing it more? Like, why hasn't it been upscaled?
Upcycling, the reason why the industry is not upscaling it is precisely because it is anathema for everything that they try and do. I mean, upcycling speaks about nothing new, and this is an industry that peddles only newness. Upcycling is about slowing down before it can speed up. The kind of oxymoron is that when we did a collection, both for Tesco and for Topshop, the fact that the waste was already within the factory, it had already been tested, and there were hundreds and hundreds of thousands of meters available to us, actually speeded up the process and made it cheaper because the waste had already been paid for, already been tested. But it's so radical what it could do that it requires a change within the factory. So that slows things down temporarily, because in order to successfully recuperate from the industry, you actually need to create a new type of the position for assembly and disassembly. Now that is reskilling garment workers. It's actually, creating benefit. So of course, the main brands won't do that if not ephemerally. Equally, transforming secondhand clothing. This could be, and is, in my opinion, a modern day craft. It responds exactly to what craft is. Craft is about using local resources, talking about local history, creating local jobs. If you start going to Ghana, for instance, in the landfills there, you can see how upcycling can become a very modern day craft form. Speaking about the folklore of this age of Anthropocene, which is what have we done to our planet? we've covered it in waste. So it's a very challenging methodology and technique because it's honest. It tells it how it is. And this is an industry that designed itself to hide the how it is.
So, how do you see the future of the fashion industry? What do you think of innovation within the industry at the minute?
The fashion industry is a really old industry, and it's one of the least sustainable and one of the least advanced when it comes to innovation. This cannot last. I mean, I'm an avid reader of history, and I'm telling you, these levels of excesses go punished eventually. So right now, this is what I believe. I believe that there are an awful lot of people practicing patience tactically with a purpose in order to reconstruct from within. And to those people that are practicing patience from within, I would like to thank them, because at the end of the day, brands are made of people. And it doesn't matter that they're owned by, some brands are made of people. And a lot of people have the best intentions. They're just moving in an environment that makes it difficult for them to practice those intentions. I have the best intentions. It's impossible for me to practice my intentions within this world, within this industry. But I carry on. To the carry honors in this life, thank you. Because right now, you will probably go to bed every night feeling useless and wake up in the morning with a panic attack thinking I can't make any changes, but you are. So I do believe that the future of the industry will change. And it is a change that involves courage, bravery, and lots of people. So it is also a change that denies the individualism of the very, very few, but strengthens the operations of the very, very many doing it together. So there is a quote by a designer called Thomas Lomé who actually paraphrased Van Gogh in the quote, but the quote says, the next big thing is lots of small things. This is also why I left my day-to-day job at Fashion Revolution, because I don't necessarily want to see the sunset of the industry anymore. I want to see the dawn.
So, we are seeing a lot more young designers starting to use upcycling at the moment, and is having a bit of a moment in some ways. What do you think is sort of driving that, and how do we continue to push it?
It is about the fact that we have resources that are as good as new, or the fact that we've got incredibly old resources that are antique and vintage. So what we are talking about is creating an aesthetic and, dare I say so, a trend, which implies that you source your materials differently. Basta! Basta! That's it. So once you think about it that way, we are fashion. It's everything else that isn't. So I can bring you examples from history, from culture, from art, from food, in which this concept of sourcing, which integrates reusing, is dead bloody normal. I mean, from wabi sabi in Japan, arte povera in Italy, punk, grunge, you name it. We've done it without doing it, without naming it. So the more we name it, the more we are marginalizing ourselves and creating a movement that doesn't need to exist. The only reason we will need to come together as a movement soon is in order to create our own kite mark, and to a certain extent we will need to respond to new European legislations, because the digital passport, that will create some practical difficulties for us in reusing. But let's stop calling us upcyclists. I mean, only do it when you are really specifically describing, like you need to say a piece is evening wear, so a piece is upcycled. Fine, that's it. But we are creating fashion with an alternative way of sourcing, which is alternative only to the last 30 years, because if you move back to fashion, haute couture, bespoke, before that, it was all about sourcing things that already existed together with things that were new. So it's your decision, your choice. It's just simply a different way of locating the materials that you want to use and a different way of interpreting those materials and creating an aesthetic that suits them. So, upcycled could be the red gown I wore for my 25th anniversary, which is this kind of long, sweeping, sort of glamorous, beautiful. Or upcycled could be a soup archive t-shirt, which is just like some sort of a crumpled thing. That's an aesthetic. Why keep putting ourselves in a corner when we actually have a technique and a methodology which is millennia of years old? So we precede them. We were before. We are doing what comes natural and instinctive to humanity. We learned how to mend the minute we learned how to make. We learned how to keep the minute we learned how to own. That's it. So if we stop somehow this generalization and just speak fashion and actually give the name unsustainable fashion to those who are unsustainable fashion rather than sustainable fashion to those who are sustainable, we begin to redress the conversation, which is really something that we need to do really damn quicko.
Yeah, amazing insights there. Thank you. Very inspiring. We definitely do need to start normalizing upcycling more in the industry. But unfortunately, we do also need the help of governments and laws. So I was wondering if you could say what kind of legislation do you think would help to reform the industry?
Yeah, well, there's a flurry of legislation which is coming from the EU. It's none of which is robust enough, but it's a step in the right direction. It shows that the EU at least is taking responsibility for what it is importing, and they realize how much they are importing from producing countries. So many of the laws will be designed in order to curb waste, in order to ensure that supply chain workers are better paid. Still no talk of a fair and living wage, but so legislation, I would say, is moving too slowly, but it is moving in the right direction. Uh, at the same time, legislation always tends to be very generic. And with upcycling, we're talking different techniques, different ways of sourcing. I mean, it's completely different whether you're reusing offcuts from a knitwear factory in pristine Veneto region in Italy, or whether, like my wonderful RCA student mentee Joyce, literally mining, spending 6 months mining the landfills in Ghana. So legislations will create problems, especially because reusing has been deliberately cancelled by the all industry, apart from very few that are more vertically in their supply chain. There's going to be a legislation that will help, and there's going to be a legislation that will hinder. When it comes to reusing, unfortunately, it will hinder. My feeling is that reusing and upcycling is quite instinctive for students, and that if we help these students with the platform, the language, and eventually also the courage to say no, this is my option and I won't let go of this choice, then of course we can also influence further, hopefully, legislations to take into account reusing endemically, which is not what is being done right now.
Yeah, once again, completely agree with you there. And at this point, another topic we haven't spoken about yet is education. So, what do you think we need from education to help better shape future fashion designers?
So sadly, I am definitely one of these people that says we shouldn't be making any more designers, because we actually need the technicians way more than we need the designers at this point. Again, particularly with something like upcycling. I mean, upcycling, you could formulate it. You can make it into a formula. Okay, how do you want upcycling denim? Blah, blah, blah. This is what you can do with denim. And, it's about technique again. So bring me the seamstress superstars. This industry is at risk of being drowned with rather mediocre creativity and very, very mediocre façon, the making. We've got the creatives that need to be balanced by their teams and the technicians. And a seamstress needs to be as important as the designer that has created the shape she's sewing. So it's about absolutely infiltrating the education system and injecting love for the manual, the making, the understanding. I actually met somebody really inspiring the other day, young French ex-student who, despite the fact that she's a really great textile artist and manipulator, decided, I just want to be technical. So she's now employed as quality control by the Chanel-owned Scottish Barry, the mill. And that's what she does, quality control. And yet this is somebody with all of the knowledge and all of the creativity. She could have put herself at the forefront, and she chose to do that job. Now that, to me, is the future. That is what we need to encourage. This is the advice I give you. Lower yourself down a peg or two. And, creativity, design, I mean, life is long. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. And creativity matures. I'm way more creative now than I was when I was myself a technician. I cut for a purpose, not for design. I cut to make, I cut to create, I cut to create a system. Do that as much as you can. Become really versed with the technical aspects, and then use your creativity to a certain extent. And if you are a designer and if you have a team of people, put them first, because ultimately they are first. I mean, creativity can live inside a brain and never come out. The people that tease it out and that make it look exactly like you conceive it, those surely are the ones that matter. Because otherwise, everything is just a seed inside a often quite grandiose brain. I mean, I love that of creatives. But creatives are little without the people that make that creativity come alive. I'm talking specifically about applied arts, obviously. So that's my advice. And it's not even actually my advice, it's my plea, I beg, I say this to everyone that will listen. We need to glamorize the techniques. And it's for so many other reasons. It's because we need to glamorize jobs that pay. We need to bring people that can't afford to be a designer to have the same opportunity as somebody that can. And the way through that is through those technical positions that right now we are almost vilifying. But also, it's, I'm a little bit fed up with this fashion designer as an artist. Sorry. Really, very, very, very few. I mean, we can't call everybody just because they are creative and they can think an artist. These are called applied arts. And the word applied, the application of that art, is often done by others who aren't the sort of the original artist. So that artistry needs the application element of it. And we are losing that as a dignified profession because it's underpaid and undervalued. And at the end of the day, we're too many to just think about the top. And that's the problem that we've got. This is an entire society that worships the single. And there is not one thing in nature, including our own bodies, that celebrate the single. It's just us. Our own brain, where we all feel that we're the chosen one, or, blah, blah. Crap. My body is made of trillions of cells. Not one is more important than the other. They all have their different function. I mean, my brain isn't more important than my stomach. My brain wouldn't function if it actually didn't have a skull or a chin or God knows whatever. And this is really important that we bring back that, multiplicity, the multitude into the industry. All designers understand the process of making. Very, very few are generous enough to say, I didn't make that. Because the process of making overtakes the process of creating at some point. So, of course, you need to have that knowledge and understanding. I wouldn't even consider a designer that doesn't. Problem is, most of them claim that understanding as being fundamental. Separate, absolutely separate. Often, the makers are the ones that suggest those tiny, vital little tweak that will make a design, or will make a collection, or will make a cut, a fit, a silhouette. So it's important to unite, but also separate, and credit where credit is, give credit where credit is needed, where credit is due.
Thank you once again, Ursula, for sharing your thoughts with us. And to conclude, is there anything you would like to share with us and the people listening? Have you got an overall message?
I mean, I think for me, the overall message is keep practicing, and keep practicing the technique, and keep practicing patience. I mean, they are urgent times for sure, and I do believe we're on the verge of achieving more than what we have so far. So keep pushing.
Great. Thank you so much, Ursula. It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for participating.
Thank you so much for inviting me, and I'm a fan, as you know.
But once again, thank you so much. And thank you so much for listening. And if you haven't yet, check out Alterist Marketplace and follow at Alterist Marketplace on Instagram. And we will see you all at our next interview, which will be with the incredible activist and journalist Belle Jacobs.